We are going to tonight reach the halfway point through Sefer Daniel. We are going to be in Perek Vav. Perek Vav, chapter 6 of Sefer Daniel. And this is really the last of the stories of Sefer Daniel. From this point on, once we resume in a few weeks, we're going to begin with Daniel's nevuos that he has about the future, about Mashiach, and about. This is really the last story we've had. So just to sum up, if you've been with us and if you haven't been with us, just to know what we've been doing. So Perek Aleph had the story of Daniel and Hanani, Mishael, Azariah being tested with eating the food while training under Nebuchadnezzar. In Perek Beis, we had the story of Nebuchadnezzar's dream with idol, which represented the four kingdoms. In Gimel, we had the story of Nebuchadnezzar making this big statue, whether that was an idol or not, and Hanani, Mishael, Azariah refused to bow down to it, and then they're thrown into the furnace. That was Perek Gimel. Perek Daled, we had the second dream of Nebuchadnezzar, where he dreams about this big tree, and the tree is chopped down, and he turns into this like quasi-animal. And then Nebuchadnezzar ends. Last week we worked on Perek Hay, which was Belshazzar and the writing on the wall. So we now are actually moving on, and we've finished with the Malchei Bavel. So we had Daryavesh and Evel Merodach and Belshazzar are the three kings of Bavel. And we now move into Daryavesh, Darius, who is the king of Madai. And this is really the next kingdom, the second kingdom, which is divided between Paras and Madai. So Perek Vav, we begin. The Daryavesh Madba'a. Kabel Malchusa, Kvar Shenin, Shitin, Tartain. So Daryavesh is 62 years old at this point when he becomes the king. And what happens? Pasuk Beis and Gimel says that he sets up this some system of government, and he has 120 people working for him in this government. And Pasuk Gimel tells us that in addition to these 120 people, there are three people who are kind of like a step above and are above those 120. And one of those three people is Daniel. So here we go again with Daniel. So he's got Daryavesh is here, a new kingdom on the map, 120 people, directing what should go on, and three main primary people, and one of those three is Daniel. Just to put things in perspective, so we know that the Sefer began with Nebuchadnezzar, and Nebuchadnezzar was king for 45 years, and then we have 23 years of his child Evel Merodach being king, so that's 68, and 2 or 3 years of Belshazzar, so we're up to 71, and now Daryavesh is the king. Now, those of you who were with us on week 1, when we started, we pointed out that does not tell us how old Daniel was. And Ibn Ezra is the only one who takes a guess, and Ibn Ezra says he thinks he was 15 years old. So if he was 15 years old in the beginning of the Sefer with Nebuchadnezzar, in this Perek with Daryavesh, he's somewhere in his 80s, right? Somewhere around 80 or 85. Okay, so Daniel on the lines then is not this young, Daniel probably having the paintings, but he's 80 or 85 years old. He at least. He can't really be much younger than that, because then the story with Nebuchadnezzar in the first parak with the food, he's got to be at least 10 years old when that story happens. He's at least in his upper 70s, if not 80s at this point. So Pasuk, we're going to begin inside with Pasuk Hay. Pasuk Hay, Pasuk Hay. So Edayan, at that point, the people felt, for whatever reason, whether they were jealous of Daniel or whether they were just trying to gun him down, they wanted to try to find something wrong with Daniel, try to point out that he has done something wrong and kind of get him in trouble. What happens? They're not able to find that he's done anything wrong, because he's really quite a trustworthy person. And nothing negative is found with him. So I'll just point out, someone put on the chat, this is actually our second to last chapter of Sefer Daniel in Aramaic. Okay, the next parak is going to be Aramaic also, and after that, the first parak was Hebrew, and the last 5 parakim were Hebrew. We have 6 middle parakim in Aramaic, and this is one of them. And in 2 weeks, when we resume with Daniel's nevuah about Matthias Mason and Mashiach, we're going to go on to it's going to be back to Hebrew. And because it's in Aramaic, that's why I've been kind of selecting which psukim to read inside. So these people want to try to get Daniel in trouble, and they're not able to, because frankly, he's doing his job properly. He's a trustworthy person. He's honest. He's a good person, and they can't find anything wrong. So Pasuk Vav, Edayan Guvraya Ilech Amrin. So they reached a conclusion. They said, La nehashkach leDaniel dina kalila. This guy Daniel, we can't find anything wrong with him. Lahain hashkachna alohi bedas elahi. So what we will do is we are going to try to get him on something regarding his religion. Meaning, the way the Mefarshim say it is basically saying he doesn't do anything wrong in his job. He's got a government position. He's great. So what we know, though, is that he's very committed religiously. So we're going to attempt to try to find an area where religiously he's so committed, and that religious commitment ends up conflicting with something in his role in government. And then we can try to find that there's something wrong with him and he's not following orders, and then we'll rat on him to the king. So they approach the king. And in Pasuk Ches, what they tell the king outside is they say, we should make the following rule. What do you think of this, king? Why don't you make a rule that for the next 30 days, you've just become king, for the next 30 days, any person who makes any kind of request which doesn't go to you first, they should be thrown into a den of lions. Okay, what's the idea of this? What's behind this suggestion? So the Mefarshim say the idea here is Daryavesh has just become king, and this is an attempt to try to display his power and his ability over everyone. And what they'll say is, what we can do here is we'll say like this, anyone who needs anything goes to you. That will, number one, demonstrate that you are all powerful and all able to take care of anyone's requests, number one. And number two, okay, that's basically it. Okay. So Pasuk Tes, Pasuk 9. Ka'an malka tikim esara v'tirshum kesava. And you should sign off on this document. Dila shnaya hidas madayu faras dila sede. That the rule will not be changed and cannot be altered. Now, for those of us familiar with some other parts of Tanakh, right, where does that ring a bell, right? That the king signs off on a decree and says, whatever's been signed off in the name of the king can't be changed, right? So where do you have that?
Megillas Esther.
Yes, you have Megillas Esther, very good, right? My Megillas Esther are the same thing. And this is, Parasamada here are kind of like the precursors to Achashverosh. So there seems to be something going on there. That seems to be like a normal thing where they have some kind of rule and it can't be changed. Okay.
Is there any particular reason why it says here Madai and Paras, but in Megillas Esther says Paras Madai?
That's a great question. So what's possible is I don't know for sure. At this point, the reason I assume it's Madai Paras is because essentially Daryavesh is Madai. He's the one who's actually the king. Where does Paras even come in here? So the Mefarshim Ibn Ezra says that really Koresh, who's going to be the next king, who's from Paras, he's really like the more powerful and like overseeing everything. And he allows Daryavesh, who is his son-in-law, I think it's his son-in-law, to be the king. So in terms of timeline, Madai becomes king before Paras. However, it seems like in terms of who's really more powerful and like riding the ship here, it seems like maybe Paras. So I'm wondering maybe in Achashverosh's time, it's like overall we're referring to Paras and Madai, like Paras really is more of the authority in the kingship. But in terms of at this point in history, they're not really on the map. I mean, Koresh might be behind Daryavesh being king, but practically speaking, Darius is the one who is the king. So Pasuk Yud Aleph, Daniel, Hidiyada, the Rishim Kesava. So Daniel hears about this thing, and he becomes aware that that there's this law put into place. Al Levi say, he goes into his home. The Kavin Pesichanle, the Eli say, and he has windows opened up in an upper story in his attic, Neged Yerushalayim. Remember, they're in Bavel now. So he has these windows in his attic facing Yerushalayim. Bizimnin tilasa biyoma, 3 times a day, hu barech al birkohi, he would kneel on his knees, umitzaleh, and he would daven, umodeh kadam Elohei, and thank Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Kol kavel dihavo aved min kadam baspina, just as he had been doing this entire time. So we're introduced here to something that Daniel had been doing all along, which is he's davening 3 times a day, like we're aware of, right? He davens 3 times a day, and he faces Yerushalayim when he does that. And he continues to do that, even in the face of this new rule that for 30 days, any request that anyone has to be made specifically of the king. He's just going to continue davening to Hashem, and that doesn't stop him. So I'll just point out one thing before we go on, and now in a moment we're going to get to the people now trying to find out about this and rat him out. So this concept where he has windows in his attic, so this comes up actually in the Gemara. The Gemara says in Brachos that based on this, the Gemara says that a person, when they daven, is supposed to have windows where they can see out. There is a question whether this applies in a shul or whether this only applies to an individual who's davening in their home. Daniel really is davening in their home, and the way the halacha is quoted in the Gemara, it sounds like when a person davens, a person should daven individually in their home. They should have windows looking outward. When the halacha is quoted in Shulchan Aruch, it makes it sound like it's which is why many shuls try to have windows around. And the Shulchan Aruch actually quotes an idea from the Zohar, which is that there's some concepts to, in addition to have windows, have 12 windows, 12, or at least 12. Okay, and that's why many shuls will, you'll notice if you count, they'll have 12 windows. It comes from here. What is the purpose of the windows in shul? So there's 2 reasons given for the windows in shul. One reason is the Rabbeinu Yonah says the reason for the windows in shul, or at least you'll have, is to let in light, to make it a pleasant, atmosphere for davening. In those days, they didn't have obviously electricity, so I guess you could light candles, but things would be kind of dim. So in order to make it pleasant, you open up the windows, and that kind of sets the tone for a nice davening. Rabbeinu Yonah says. Rashi says a different reason. Rashi says the reason is because you want windows so that we can look out and look towards Shemaim and to think of Hashem. So when this halacha is quoted in Shulchan Aruch, it's interesting. The Mefarshim, the Mishnah Berurah, and others say that there seems to be a contradiction here. Because on the one hand, the Shulchan Aruch says when a person davens Shemona Esrei, they're supposed to have their eyes down. It's a way of submission to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and a way of focus on the siddur or not looking around. And on the other hand, we have this halacha that comes from here, from Daniel, to have windows in the shul, and you're supposed to look out, up to Shemayim. So the Mefarshim try to figure out which one is it. You're looking up to Shemayim, you're not supposed to be looking around. You're distracted, you're supposed to focus and look down. So there's two famous answers given to this question. Bach explains, he says that it's really two different times of davening. Bach says before a person starts Shemona Esrei, they should look out towards these windows, which we get the idea from Daniel, and they should look up to Shemayim, and they see the sky, and they should stop for a moment to think about HaKadosh Baruch Hu and what they're doing, and then they begin Shemona Esrei, and they should start davening, and then that's when they should be looking down and not wandering around. One nice idea. The Magen Avram says something which I think is also interesting, is that he says that really, ideally, a person should be looking down or have their eyes closed in Shemona Esrei, looking in a siddur, not looking around and being distracted. But he says, practically speaking, we know that that's not the way people work, and people get distracted, and that's okay. He says if a person gets distracted, when they're distracted, what should they do? Have these windows in the shul to look up and out towards Shemayim. So I always like that idea because I think it takes into account, there's like a certain ideal, and then it takes into account like where people are holding and where people are at and understanding people. So, ideally, maybe it should be a certain way, but practically speaking, that's not, the ideal doesn't always work for everyone, and people are people, and that's the way they are. So in due to that, Shulchan Aruch says make sure to have windows that if we're going to be looking around, at least at a point, we can try to make that looking towards Hashem, Shemayim, and to think of that. Okay, so Pasuk Yud Beis, back to the story of Daniel. Edayin at that point, Guvraya Ilech, these men who are working in the government, are Gichu, they sensed this. And they found him. And he's davening. It's not clear exactly how they found him. The Mefarshim don't really address it. It's not, there's a few possibilities, right? One possibility is his windows were open, so he's standing by the window and he's davening. So they walk by maybe his home and they see that. Another possibility is they were especially focused on him because the whole decree that they set up was just to try to get him in trouble. So it could be that they were specifically had people out spying him and following him around to try to catch him. So Pasuk Yud Gimel, now they come to the king. Beidayin at that point. They approached. Amrin Kadam Malka. Alasar Malka. Hello, Asar Rishamta, Dikal Anash. They said to the king, look, you made a rule. You made a rule that says any person who makes a request, min kol elah ve'enash ad yom tlasin, from any god or power or any person up to 30 days, lahein minach malka, who's not you, the king, yisremei, they will be thrown legov aryavasa, into a den of lions. Anei malka ve'amar, Daryavesh, the king says, Yatziva, Milsa, it is true what you're saying. Kedas madai paras dilasedei. This is the rule, and it cannot be changed. Pasuk Yodalit. Beidayim, at that point, Anova Amrin. So they said to the king, once they kind of got him, they reminded him, they said, okay, you remember this, right? We're on the same page. You're on board for this. The decree is a decree, can't be changed, okay? Deal? Good. Now, they said, okay, so now we got you. Because they said, Di Daniel, Dimin B'nei Galusa Di Yehud, Daniel, who was from one of those people who came over from the Galus, from Yehuda. Again, 70 years plus prior. He's not paying attention to your law. Val Estara Dir Shamta, and the decree which you said. And he is davening 3 times a day. Pasuk Tezvav, Edayin Malka Kedimot Sakshma. When the king heard this, Sagi Be'esh Elohi, which seems to mean he was very bothered by this, right? Eish is like fire, like he burned up. Sagi Be'esh Elohi, he was very annoyed. So why is he so annoyed about this? So Rashi says he was so annoyed about this not because it was an affront to him. Rashi says that he loved Daniel, he liked him, and he favored him. He already, before the whole thing, he put him in charge, in a position of power. So the king was like, no, like, oh, come on, like, how could you do this? Because now he's stuck. He's saying, really, I like you, but now I got to keep to my word because like they have me cornered. So he's like bothered, not so much that Daniel's going against him. I mean, circumstantially he's going against him. He doesn't really care that he's going against him, that he's doubting. But he's upset because now he's got to follow through, but he really likes Daniel. He's torn. So what does he do? Va'al Daniel sam bal l'shezavuse, and he kind of gives Daniel some time. He tries to like delay things. Va'ad me'alei shimsha hava mishadar l'hatzaluse, and I think it means like he didn't do anything until the evening, right? Until the sunset. Like he was either trying. The Masuda says he was trying to come up with maybe some way lahatzaluse to save Daniel, or he's letting him buy time in hopes that something will come up that will save him. Okay. So pasuk Yud Zayin, skipping to 17, Yud Zayin. Beidayin at that time, Malka Amar, the king said, "V'haisivla Daniel," and he said, "Tell Daniel to be brought to us. Or Remo legupa diaryavasa, and we will throw him in the lion's den." Anei Malka v'Amar Daniel, he said to him, "Elahach ant palachle b'tedira." God, which you are continuously davening to, who yishes vinach, he will save you. And it sounds like he's not saying that sarcastically. It sounds like he's really saying that, like he believes in Daniel and he doesn't want to, he says, I got to go through with this. He says, look, time's up, sir. You're going in, and I hope this God that you worship is going to help you. And what did they do? Pasuk Yud. In addition to this, v'heisayis eben chada, they brought this one stone. presumably it was a large, boulder or something. The sumas al guba, and they put it at the entrance of the den, presumably to not allow anyone to enter or to tamper with it. You'll see it says v'chasma malka is kisei, and they stamped it with the seal of the king. So they put a stamp on there, and basically saying that no one should change what's been decided here. It's been decided that Daniel's going into the lion's den. We're going to put this big thing over here, this big rock, so that nothing has changed and no one interferes here and no one tampers with this, and we're going to let things play out. Pasuk Yud Tes. So the king, Daryavish, goes back to his palace. Ubas Tavas, and he doesn't eat anything. He can't eat. The Dachvan Lohan El Kodamohi, which Rashi says means like they weren't like entertaining him, right? Like there was no fancy entertainment that night, no food. Shinte Nadasalohi, and he couldn't sleep. He was really, really bothered by this. It's like he just he's thinking about Daniel, and he can't, he's not settled at all. Veidayan Malka Bishparpara Yukum Benaga. So the king wakes up very, very early in the morning. And very quickly, he runs over to wherever this lion's den is, and he makes his way over there to see what came of this. And he approaches the den where Daniel is. B'kol atziv ziik. So I think I read that incorrectly. I think it's mikra leguba. When he approaches it, Daniel b'kol atziv ziik. He calls out to Daniel in this loud voice. Anem al kava amar Daniel, and he says to him, Daniel, Aved Eloha Chaya, the God which you worship, Elohach di'ant palachle b'tidira. Was that God able to save you? Now, I'm not clear whether he can look down and he sees him, or he's just calling out and he can't see him and he's waiting to hear Daniel's response. Daniel begins to speak to the king, and he says, the king should live. Elohi, my God, Shilach Malache, he sent his angel, Usagar Pum Aryavasa, who closed up the mouths of the lions, V'lo chabaluni, and they did not hurt me and damage me. Kol kavel di kadamohi zachu ishtakachasli. So I think it means he's saying they obviously didn't do this because there must have been some kind of zechus, right? Di kadamohi, in front of me, zachu, zechus. I must have had some zechus, ishtakachasli. God found. Ba'af kadamach malka, and and my king, that I've never done anything against you, and that must be why then I was saved here. So the king pulls Daniel out of the lion's den, and then what happens? Pasuk Chafei, Amar Malka, Guvraya Ilech. Daniel doesn't just get out. The king then calls the people who ratted on him, the Achalu Kartsohi di Daniel, who spoke about him, Ulagov Aryavasa Remo, and he throws them into the pit. Inun Benehon Unachehon, them and their sons and daughters. And presumably, Benehon, their children, Unachehon, and their wives. Allah Mitola Aris Guba, they didn't even hit the bottom of the den. Adi Shalitu Bahon Aryavasa, the lions attacked them, v'chol garmehon hadiku, shattered all their bones. Pasuk Chavav, Beidayan Daryavish Malka Kasav l'chol amamayav umayav lishanaya. So at that point, Daryavish sends out this letter, and he sends out a letter to all the people who live under his kingdom, and he says to them, Pasuk Chavzayin 27, Min kadamai sim te'em, from me, the following rule: Di b'chol sholtan malchusi, over everything that rules in my kingdom. Everyone should fear the God that Daniel worships. He is the living God. The Kayam La'almin, he lives forever. He exists forever. Malchutse Dilo Yisas Abal. His kingship will never be, damaged. Vishaltane Ad Sofa, and his dominion goes forever. And the parak basically concludes in pasuk Chavtes. It says, "Daniel dina hatzlach b'malchus Daryavesh." He continued to succeed in his role in the malchus of the Daryavesh, of malchus Koresh Parsa, and into the kingship of Koresh, who's going to Daryavesh. And that is the story of Daniel in the lion's den. I know when we're in person, it's a little easier, but before we go on, I'm just going to introduce Parak Zion. But before that, any questions or comments? Anyone want to?
Was the king, was this King Darius, was he Esther's son, or this is before, or this is the grandfather of that king?
Good question. This is the grandfather of that one. Right?
Gotcha.
Darius, what they call in English, Darius the Mede. Darius Mede, Madai, he was the grandfather of that Darius. So we'll see, or the ancestor. We'll see. I'm trying to think. No, we won't see the other one, but we will see the other one actually later. I think in Parak 10. This is not the child of Esther. Okay. Parak Zion is the last parak it's the last Aramaic parak. All the rest are in Hebrew. But it is the first parak. It's a transition. It's the first parak. It's the last six, which deal no longer with stories of Daniel, but nevuos that Daniel has, and a lot of this touches on Mashiach and Tchias HaMesim and the like, and hopefully we'll discuss some of that and see some of the calculations that were made as to when Mashiach came based on was supposed to come based on these and not come, and how different Mefarshim arrived at that. And so we'll be working on that in the next few weeks. I just want to give just like a little bit, and then we'll stop. So in case people have to go at the Meyer Shul, we'll wrap it up so they can get there. Daniel basically has a vision here, and this parak Zion begins b'shnas chadol Belshazzar melech Bavel, in the first year of Belshazzar. So this is not in order at all, because last week parak we talked about Belshazzar, and that was when the hand came down and started writing on the wall. And if you remember, the way that parak ended was that Belshazzar was killed. He was assassinated that night after the handwriting on the wall. It says, your kingship is going to be over. He died that night. Now it was after he had been king for 2.5, 3 years. So this nevuah that we're about to read happens in the first year. It happens even before parak A. After Nebuchadnezzar is finished and after Evel Merodach is finished, begins this nevuah. And I'll just I'll say it outside, and then when we resume in a few weeks, we'll talk about maybe what the symbolisms are here. But essentially, Daniel has a dream, and he has a dream about 4 beasts, and it sounds very, very mystical, and it's something like out of almost like out of a movie that it's like it's very almost like sounds like fantasy. As he has a dream, and he sees 4 beasts. Number 1, he sees these beasts coming out of the water, and one of them is a lion, and it's a lion with wings, and the lion with wings is like lifted off of the ground, and after the lion with eagle's wings is lifted off the ground, and its wings, the eagle's wings that it has, are being like pulled out of the lion, and that's basically it. And he then sees another vision where he sees another animal, and it's a bear. And he sees this bear walking along, and it's got 3 ribs in its mouth. The third thing he sees is a leopard, and the leopard has these 4 wings on it, and it's a 4-headed leopard. Okay, so we have a lion with wings, a bear with these like ribs in its mouth, and a 4-headed leopard with wings as well. And the 4th thing he sees is not an animal that we know of. It's some kind of like beast. It doesn't even say what it is. It's some crazy kind of beast that has these like iron teeth, and it's like crawling up everything, and it's got these 10 horns coming out of it. And in addition to the 10 horns coming out of it, it's got this other small horn. And then Daniel continues to talk about how he has some kind of vision of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He sees Hashem with this long white, flowing white hair, and he gets some kind of nevuah. So we're gonna discuss what exactly some of these things correspond to. Again, in short, those of you who were with us a few weeks when Nebuchadnezzar had his dream about the idol, and there were the idol represented the four kingdoms. So obviously many Meforshim say that that's what Daniel's having a dream here, about the four kingdoms. And the lion represents Nebuchadnezzar and Bavel, so we'll discuss why that is. The bear represents Madai, again, we'll have to discuss why that is. The leopard is going to represent Greece, and this last beast is going to represent Rome or Christianity. And the final thing is he has some kind of vision of Hashem and some kind of message as to when the end will come. Very, very vague. And we'll try to touch upon that and see some of the Meforshim guesses they took as to when they thought Mashiach was based off of that. We'll be off the next 2 weeks and resume, I guess, on Thursday night, July 22nd, I think it is. Okay. Have a wonderful Shabbos, everyone.
July what day did you say were?
July 22nd.
Oh, July 22nd, got it.
Yeah, the 8th we're off and the 15th we're off, and then we'll resume on the 22nd at 9 o'clock in Ahom Moshe. Good night.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Shabbos.
Shabbos.